No question about it. And it's good to see you, Patricia, and all the old time members of the Golden Gate Breakfast Club who I've not seen in so long. And I look forward to meeting the new members as well.
Good. Well, certainly, Susan and I have known you for years. We were both on your radio show long before we became besties. And of course, as you know, we consider you a legend in the Golden Gate Breakfast Club. However, some of our guests and newer members who don't live in the Bay Area are not so familiar. So, what I am going to do is what I say loosely interview, guide the conversation a little. And on behalf of Susan, she said she wants to know the most dishy stories that you can't tell. We know you know many you can't tell.
That's right. The ones you can tell, that's important.
Yeah. So, would you please? Susan and I saw you last when we went to a magnificent sold out Motown show in Marin that you've had for multiple years. Could you just give a snapshot of the history of the Motown event and how do you get such a stellar lineup?
Well, thank you for having me, and it's great to be here and see all the old members, as I said, and meeting the new members as well. What happened was about 7 years ago, my wife and I were watching the Kennedy Center. They were giving awards to actually the Library of Congress was giving the Gershwin Award to Smokey Robinson. And we thought that's an interesting choice. So we thought, why not combine the genres? We would do Cole Porter Society salutes Motown. And it turned out to be a great idea. We got the best musicians in the area that we could, starting with Carlos Reyes, who's performed for six presidents and the Pope. Other musicians were just fantastic, and we put the show on, and it sold out. And it's been a favorite every year, and we just enjoy doing it. And I think the community enjoys it. I think if you do a show more than once a year, at least a particular show, you kind of wear people out. So we make sure that we do it once a year. And this year, we over half the people that showed up were newcomers that had never been there before. So word of mouth is probably the best way of publicizing something. And every year we enjoy it. The people expect. This year we had the best intentions who started out with us. They were five guys from the post office, and they got together and they do Temptations and the Four Tops. And they become so famous now, they're on PBS. And we normally couldn't afford them, but they said, we'll do it for you because we really love you and we love what you're doing. And the highlight of the show was one of the members told everybody in the audience to stand up and to dance in place. And that's how much fun people had. It was wonderful. And so it's a highlight of my year to be able to do that show. And talking about Christmases, as you were a little bit earlier, one of the Christmases I remember was talking my father out of having my first class air ticket to come home my first year in college. They missed me. And I said, okay, well, how about if I take the bus? And it was $56.85. So I got on the bus on a Wednesday in Nashville, Tennessee. The next day we were in Texas. I said, they've made a mistake. We're not due to San Francisco until Saturday morning. Well, we spent the better part of 2 days in Texas. I've never had more respect for a state than I had then. And then the other time was my brother and I were going to catch Santa Claus. We're going to sleep in the kitchen sleep in the bedroom, the living room until Santa came. And I don't know how my parents, who were a little elderly at that point, because we didn't have me till I was 50, and my brother was till my dad was 52. I don't know how they got all the toys in their bikes and all, but it was a great Christmas to remember. And also playing Santa on the radio, which is, ho, 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 Merry Christmas, everyone. I did that for a number of years, even fool my little kids. And I would never say that Santa will bring that to you because I didn't know if the parents could afford the gifts. So I just said, well, we will see. We will see. So thank you for that question.
Oh, lovely, lovely, lovely. Now, we have teased everybody that you will be singing a little later in the program, and you perform with some amazing people, the Philadelphia Philharmonic and Duke Ellington's band. So, what are some of your favorite musical memories?
Well, the one with Duke Ellington was I was with the Harvard University Choir at that point when I was in law school, and I was given a solo. The solo is in the a sacred concert, which first debuted in 1965 here in San Francisco when Grace Cathedral was dedicated, and he played it for the rest of the remainder of his life around the country. And he played it in Boston and did his solo. And I saw in the newspaper, the New York Times, he was looking for a new singer. I asked his advance man what would be an appropriate song. So he gave me a 1925 song the Duke had written that wasn't all that popular called I'm Afraid. And it was very appropriate because singing for and having him play for you it was terrifying. I was afraid. Uh, and I sang this song and he played it all the way through and he turned into a giant ear. This was before the performance. And he stepped away from the piano right away. And I thought, boy, I've really done poorly. So I made sure that I nailed my solo in the sacred concert. So I went backstage later and asked him, I'm sorry I wasted your time. He said, you didn't waste anybody's time. He said, but don't be afraid to tell anybody something's not in your key. So that was, that was a metaphor for life. If Duke Ellington plays it in a certain key, then I'm supposed to play it in that key. But I learned a lot from that particular experience with him. The Philadelphia Philharmonic was great. We wound up staying in the Statler Hilton, which was famous in Philadelphia for uh, a, not a disease, but a
Yeah, I remember. Was it Legionnaires?
that's
Legionnaires.
exactly right. Good memory. Good memory. Um, and that was memorable and a lot of fun. And over the years, I mean, I was in the San Francisco Boys Chorus. We shared the stage with Nat Cole, with Leontine Price, with Paul Robeson. I mean, that's going way back into history. And the one thing I remember singing with the Boys Chorus in 1956 at the Cow Palace for the Republican Convention was going back to the car, and I was stuck in an island in the middle of the street, Geneva Avenue, and I came by in a motor car, motorcade, and I froze because I thought I should not be allowed to be this close to the president of the United States. It's a security issue. Little did I know, 7 years later, what would happen. But that was quite a memory, and also being real up close to Nat King Cole was something because he was one of the idols at the point, and all the Christmas music, the wonderful Christmas music he's given us, and further getting into his history and his story. You know, his last concert was in San Francisco. Actually, he's down at the Circle Star Theater. He died at the age of 45, and you think of him as a legend living much longer than that. He and Sinatra both dropped out of school in the eighth grade, and Sinatra attributes his comeback to Nat Cole because he was with Capitol Records in 1951, and Nat Cole couldn't, or Sinatra couldn't get arrested at that point. And he went to the head of Capitol Records and said, "This man's future is in front of him. You have to hire him." And so he owed a lot to Nat. And later in his career, he was touring with Natalie Cole as kind of a thank you to his passed on good friend and mentor and helper.
Wow. Now, this is a Rowan question, of course.
Okay.
Your parents founded the NAACP chapter here in San Francisco. How did that shape you?
Well, and in many, many ways, my parents were educators, and my dad had taught at a host of HBCUs, primarily in the South. He was actually on the faculty with some great people at that time. He wound up in the Florida State school system, where they were paying black teachers 47% of what they were paying white teachers by law. And he said, I've the same education as anybody else, I have the same credentials as anybody else, and I deserve to be paid the equal salaries. Well, they tried it in state court and they lost. There were only 3 black lawyers in the state of Florida at that time. My dad had taught Thurgood Marshall in Lincoln University, and Thurgood said, I'll take the case. He was with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. So they took the case. It took them 6 years, but they finally won. But for their reward, my parents were barred from teaching in the state of Florida. So Roy Wilkins, who was executive director of the NAACP, asked my dad, would you like a job with the association? And what you would be doing is establishing 11 regional states out of San Francisco. So Thanksgiving, 1944, he and my mother moved to San Francisco. I came along 2 years later, but it was quite the job establishing the regional NAACP. So he was gone a lot of the time, but I really appreciate the hard work that he put in, and the people whose admiration he gained. A personal letter from Thurgood Marshall. I ran for supervisor in 1971, and my mother was just dauntless. She would ask anybody for a contribution. So she asked Thurgood Marshall for a contribution. He sent back a letter, which I gave to my second son when he passed the bar. I said, "Dear Teresa, while I'm tickled that Noah is running for office as a Supreme Court justice, I'm unable to make a contribution. By the way, I have 2 kids in college and I'm broke." so, so years later, actually before I was at Harvard Law School, and he uh, was the judge in a moot court trial, the final moot court case trial. And I told him that I was Noah Griffin's son. He said, "Noah Griffin." I said, "Yeah, well, I'll tell my dad that you said hello." He said, "Dad, hell, you tell that cute mother of yours." I said, "Fine." So he, he was a rollicking kind of guy. And I've read his biography since. And we were actually at the dedication of the Thurgood Marshall School in San Francisco, and his widow came out, and I have a wonderful picture with her, and great memories of my dad's stories about him and the stories that he's written. And while he was on the court, the way in which he was able to sway the court by virtue of his experiences. I think he was the first African American on the Supreme Court, and it was quite a day when he was nominated and filled that position.
Wow. Well, Rowan, that was a good question because we got some great answers. Wow. Now, also, for decades, you've been politically involved. And please, can you tell us some of your memorable stories? And remember, Rowan likes the dish about working in the administration of Mayor Frank Jordan and Senator Dianne Feinstein.
Oh, well, it started a little before that. I ran for supervisor right out of law school. 1631 Market Street was my office. It was right next to the Plumbers Union and across the street from where Clint Riley ran his first campaign for Dick Hongisto, who was running for sheriff at that point. And it was interesting. I, surprisingly enough, got 33,000 votes on a $5,000 budget. And it was good enough for people to take notice. And I listened to Mayor Alioto, who was running at the time, his press conference the next day. It was on the radio. And a reporter asked, "Well, what are you going to do about those 2 young Black candidates?" I was young then, who ran for supervisor. I was 25 years old, and the other person who ran was 18 years old. And he says, "Well, they either have a place in my administration or a commission." So Bernie Averbuch was my political mentor, and I went to Bernie. I said, "What shall I do?" He says, "Well, whatever you do, tell the mayor I'll think about it. I mean, don't just give it up right away. I mean, just I'll think about it. It'll play a little hard to get." So I remember going to the mayor Alioto's office, and those of you who've been in it's still there now because it was renovated in the mayor's office, and there was the red carpet and all the alcaldes on one side of the wall and all the mayors on the other side of the wall. Alioto, a bullion as he always was, he opened there and said, "Hello, Noah. How you doing, son? Sit down. You ran a hell of a race." And he got to the point quickly. He says, "What would you like? A position in my administration or commission?" Commission, Mr. Mayor." "That's fine. Go to Tom Flynn and have him write it out." I mean, so much for playing hard to get. And then Dianne could give out commissions at that point because she was president of the Board of Supervisors. And so I wound up getting a commission from Dianne, and also was her second administrative aide, which was quite something. She was, I got a real education in politics from Dianne. I must say that. She was tough, but she was very fair. And it was just something to learn to be in politics on your own. I remember Bruce Rafel, who was administrative aide to Ron Pelosi at the time, passed around a reference, wanted me to sign a petition so that the administrative aides could get paid more money. And I signed it. I'm always used to signing things I agreed with, et cetera. And she looked at me, she says, "Take your name off that." I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "You work for me. Everything that you do reflects on who I am." And so that was some of the lessons that I learned. Some of the fun things about Dianne was Warren Simmons, who developed Pier 39. I don't know if you remember when that was open. Aside from Disneyland, more people visit Pier 39 in the course of a year than any other amusement park or some location. And so Warren really loved Dianne. He thought she thought the world of her. He tried to sneak in contributions through other people that worked for him, and she would always have to look to see who worked for him. And the bet was, if you finish this on time, he's building Pier 39 under budget. I will show up, and I want you to show up, he said to her, in a bikini. So Dianne comes to the opening, and she's got a trench coat on. And all of a sudden, the big reveal. She opens it up, and it's an 1890 Sutro baths bathing suits. So she was able to fulfill the promise her way. She did it her way. And that was a fun memory. In 2009, we went to the inaugural Barack Obama, and I was with my wife, and she says to Dianne, "I understand you helped my husband grow up." She said, "Yes, I did, and he certainly needed it." And I was running for supervisor in I'm the only person who's lost in two counties in Marin County. I did eventually when I was a town councilman in Tiburon, but at any rate, I had Diane's endorsement, and I had Kevin Starr's endorsement. I had Mayor Gavin Newsom's endorsement, and it wasn't until later that I realized I'm running in Marin County. People don't give a damn whose endorsement you get in San Francisco. But that's one of the many mistakes I made in politics before I finally got it right and ran for councilman in Tiburon, which was an interesting race in and of itself. There were four candidates. I got more votes than the three others combined. Knocked on doors. We had a group of people calling, and that was a real education. And people handled it really well. We had a bus with my name on either side that toured the country, kind of country toward the town, and nobody even gave me the finger the whole time I ran. It's a very civilized race, knocking on doors, etc. So, hooray for Tiburon!
All right, good. Now it's running in the family. How did you feel when your daughter was ushering around Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi?
My daughter is kind of the rock star of the family in many ways. She graduated from Branson, and she was accepted or waitlisted at 10 different colleges. I took her all around for 10 days. And I told this is probably, she was like 17 years old, probably the longest time we'll ever spend together as father and daughter. And it's interesting. I told my kids, make a list of all the pluses and minuses of the places, colleges that you're accepted, that you think or good or bad about the place, and then go with your heart. I never want you to say that I forced you to go anywhere. Of all the 10 colleges that we went to, she got out of Georgetown. First thing she said, I like this place. I could have knocked the other 9 off the list. Her then mother wanted her to go to Columbia because Georgetown was rated, I think, 25th or something. Columbia was rated 4th. But it's not a question of the rating. It's a question of where you feel comfortable, where you'll enjoy the most. So I introduced her to Nancy Pelosi, and Nancy hired her, and she worked summers in her office in San Francisco, and then when she left that office, she worked for her full time in D.C. In her house office, and it was a wonderful experience for her to learn and to understand how politics really works. Her mother had worked in politics before, and so it was kind of good for her to find out firsthand what it was like. I think she was the first Black press secretary for the Speaker of the House, and she led the Speaker in for the impeachment hearings, and she just learned so much. Fortunately, she left before the January 6th incident. She was taken away and a great job. She was global manager for Spotify in New York. But when that whole thing was going on, she was in contact with the folks in the office. So that's something that I'm glad that she wasn't there, but I feel sad for the people who were there because of all the things that happened that particular day. But so she now works for another firm in Washington, D.C., and is doing well. And I last saw her at my oldest boy's wedding, which took place maybe 3 weeks ago. It was the best wedding I ever went to. I never enjoyed a wedding so much. His brother is a lawyer and very verbal and kind of emceed everything. And I won't bore you with all the details, but the funniest thing that happened was his bride's name is Gretel, and her best friend said, "Gretel, I want you to put your hand on the table." She put her hand on the table in front of where Gretel was speaking. "Noah, I want you to put your hand on top of Gretel's," which he did. He said, "Look me in the eye. That's the last time in this marriage that you will ever have the upper hand."
Oh, how funny. Well, because I was going to ask you about a couple of the personal highlights, and of course that was one of them, and the other is
Of what now?
your personal highlights of last year. So your son was married and your wife?
Oh gosh, we the highlight of the year was 2 years ago, November 11th. My wife was Meredith was diagnosed with fourth stage breast cancer. It started as a lesion in her back, and went to the doctor, and it we gave her and the doctor as well 3 months to live. She lived for she's lived for 2 more years beyond that, and just within the last month, she went to the doctor and found out that the cancer is in remission, and she does not have to go back for another year. And you talk about believing that prayer works. It was a miracle, and I'm just so grateful. I'm just so grateful and so thankful. And that's been the highlight of my year. One of the highlights of my life. Of course, my second son roasted me. He says, "You've been married 3 times now. Wait a minute, you got to get this right." And Meredith says, "I will be your third and your final wife." And
Yeah,
she,
yeah.
she was determined to outlast the others in terms of how many years we've been married. And it's been a wonderful relationship. She's my best friend, and and going through this journey together with her, the conversations get more real about what life is all about, and you just want to enjoy every moment, every day, every year, month, every year. And it's been my privilege to be a full-time caretaker. I stepped down from the town council. I was vice president and due to be mayor the next go round. It cycles. But I sat down with John Briscoe, a really good friend of mine who's a lawyer, and said, "Let's take a look at everything that you do, Noah, and what your priority is." So we took a look at every board that I sat on, every volunteer thing I was doing, work experience. He said, "Let's get rid of them all so that you can take care of your wife full time." And it's the best decision I ever made. And he was very honest because I sat on one of his boards, and he said, "That's not important. That's not important." So I'm just grateful to have friends that will be honest with you like that, and go through situations, just look at you objectively as they can. So that's been a real privilege, and to be able to take care of her for the last 2 years.
Well, that is a Christmas miracle. So that is wonderful. Now, moving to what are your personal memories of San Francisco Christmases from the past?
Oh my goodness. The first one I remember was seeing Santa was in the window at Macy's at O'Farrell and Stockton in those days. And I have a picture of my brother and I at 5 and 3, just with all this awe, looking at Santa Claus. And it's a wonderful picture. And I post it on Facebook every year. Uh, and I remember the huge Christmas tree that was in the city of Paris, which was wonderful. Just big, big, big tree. Uh, and then the trains at the top of the Emporium. The trains would circle at Christmas time. And there's also a creche in Golden Gate Park. I lived on 41st Avenue between Fulton and Cabrillo, and there's an entrance in the park at 36, and right past that, they'd have spotlights on somebody playing Mary and somebody playing Joseph and lambs, and it's just exciting and wonderful to see. There's You probably couldn't do it today. There's so many different religions to honor, but that was one thing that I remembered most at Christmas time. And then driving out in the sunset, there was a street there that had wonderful lights and decorations, and we would drive by there. And as I mentioned, trying to catch Santa, sleeping was how they got those bikes and everything in there without my knowing. And the first bike that you get is just so wonderful because it's your first sense of independence. You know, you can, because my dad before that would drive us through Golden Gate Park, and he would say stop, and we would go explore. You, with all the things going on in Golden Gate Park today, homeless, et cetera, drug taking, you really couldn't do that. But things were a lot safer then. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful Christmas memory.
Now, Roanne wants to know, what do you miss most about the old San Francisco? However you define the old San Francisco.
Well, since I'll be 79, my next birthday was old San Francisco was a long time ago, especially for most of you in this meeting. But what I remember most was the feeling of safety and security. And there's a biblical advent. He that increases knowledge and increases sorrow. You know, walking down Market Street with my parents, I didn't see any danger at all. I didn't see somebody that could walk out of an alley or do something harmful to you or a crazy person. I just felt very secure with my parents. And it might have been very very not so much different from today. But when you're parents, you feel completely safe. And those were just wonderful, wonderful memories. I do remember Bridget Bardot starred in the movie and God Created Women, or God Created something. And there was this big poster cutout of Bridget Bardot. And I was just 10 or 11 years old. I was kind of looking up at that poster. And my mother grabbed my hand. She said, "Come along, son."
I remember that poster. I remember that movie.
She did the same thing when Marilyn Monroe starred in Some Like It Hot. And she had that dress that was kind of painted on her. And I'm like, I was staring at the TV. She says, "Leave the room, Noah. Leave the room."
All right, good. Well, at this point, I will open it up to have some questions from our audience before we get you to sing.
Sure.
So, Roanne, I know you had another couple of questions on your list. Would you like to ask one of them?
Let me let someone else ask, and then because I've had so many of my questions answered, and I will defer to someone else, and then I'll come back and ask.
All right. Well, Janice Litvin has her hand up. So Janice, now, Janice is a past president of our local chapter of the National Speakers Association and a very dynamic person. She spoke at the club and then joined us like so many of our other out of town members. So Janice from Walnut Creek, what is your question?
So Noah, first of all, thank you for joining us. I was here the last time you joined us a year or two ago. So thank you so much for your time. I always love your stories. I moved to San Francisco in 1973 when Dianne was the mayor. I guess my question for you is, of all the many, many accomplishments, and first of all, I want to say, thank God your wife is okay. I very much feel that strongly. Of all your many, many accomplishments and accolades, what are you the most proud of?
You know, I was interviewed when I was 50 years old, and it was in the newspapers, The Life Well Led. I just wanted to raise four well-raised children, and they're all independent. They all depend upon each other. They're all each other's best friends, and a poem behind. I've written several poems, one of which, and some songs, one of which I read at I was inspired when they were, I'll go back to how it came about. I've always been a fan of the Massachusetts 54th Regiment. It was the Glory Regiment, for those of you who don't know. It was the film with Denzel Washington and Matthew Broderick. It was based on their story. And when I was 12 years old, my father, who was the son of an enslaved man, and wife, took me by a place in Florida where the Massachusetts 54th liberated that area. And I was on a fellowship at Yale when I was 19 years old, and I did a paper a summer fellowship on the recruitment of the Massachusetts 54th. So I followed them my entire life. So when they were filming the movie Glory down in Beaufort, South Carolina, I actually flew down there, and I met the grandson of one of the men who actually fought in there, fought in the movie, fought in the regiment itself. And I was so inspired. I wrote half the poem on the plane and the other half when I got back. And one of the highlights of my life is when they unveiled the Black Civil War veteran statue in Washington, D.C. I was asked to come and read the poem. So, if I leave a legacy, I would like that. They have a copy of the poem in the National Archives, and one of my dreams is to have my poem there. Paul Revere's Ride kind of tells you everything about that period, and so that's the storming of Fort Wagner, which they did on July 18th, 1863. They're the first group of Black soldiers in the vanguard of 187 that would every 187,000 that would be in the war, and but prove that Black soldiers could fight. That would be the highlight of my life, just the kids getting along well. I almost feel superfluous at this point because they've done their thing, and I just feel like kind of an add-on, but I still love to see the grandchildren and the marriages happen, and hope for the future that they will live in.
Well, I say to everybody who has children and grandchildren, you have to record your stories, because they will have children, and it's important for them to know about you and your parents and their parents. So at least we've got a little recording of this to share. But to sit down, and we did this with my Uncle Bill, who spent all of World War II in prisoner war camps, and he never talked about it. And then in 2001, when he started talking, I flew home and we just sat him down with our little flip cameras, and we recorded 2 days of his stories. Yeah, amazing.
Well, it makes me feel old when a friend of mine. Well, in 1962, my mother was a senior and I was a junior delegate to the NAACP convention in Atlanta. And my mother had grown up with Martin Luther King's mother. And so we stayed at the King's home. And my father always told me that Atlanta was the Black economic capital of the country. And I didn't understand it. So we got to Atlanta. We told the cabbie to take us to Dale Creek Road. It was split lawns, rolling lawns, swimming pools, tennis courts, and it was all Black. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. And this little diminutive woman came out and greeted us. So we stayed with her. And my friend later on said to his kids, "Do you want to shake the hand of somebody who shook the hand of Martin Luther King?" And I realized that I'm passing into history, and what a privilege it was to stay there that summer and to meet him and to hear him speak at Ebenezer Baptist Church. And when he died, his mother sent me a copy of his most recent book and inscribed it to me. My mother always tells the story. At 19 years old, she was asked to be at Mrs. King's wedding, and she didn't want to pay for one of the bridesmaids' dresses. So she said later on, had I known her son was going to be so famous, I'd have bought that dress.
Okay, Janelle Barlow, your question for Noah.
Thank you so much, Noah. This is, when I got to shake Obama's hand when he was running for president, I can't say it was the same experience you had shaking Martin Luther King's hand. But my question to you is, when Obama was elected, that night on television, that night with all those people in the park in Chicago, what was your deepest emotional reaction to that whole experience? Because that was a first for Americans.
Well, I never thought it was going to happen. I thought he was going to roll along, and then eventually Hillary would get the nomination. And I know when I had the opportunity to vote for him, I took my youngest boy out of school, dressed him in a suit, came with all the kind of a collector, the autograph of all the famous people from Frederick Douglass to Lincoln and others into the voting area. And so he could watch me vote for who would become the first African-American president of the United States. It was kind of a sense of disbelief, but I knew at the time where everybody was saying, this will be the end of racism in America. That wasn't true, but it was such a milestone to see him. And I spoke with him when he had written a couple of books, and he was in Marin County, and I got a chance to meet and talk with him then about our mutual experiences at Harvard Law School and other things. But it was a seminal moment in my life and in the life of the country. It's going to be interesting. And there's always like a backlash after things move forward. There was like after the Civil War, there was Reconstruction, and that ended in 1877 with the Hayes-Tilden election. Hayes, it was a tie. It went into the House of Representatives, and Hayes promised the South that it was cordoned off into military districts. If you elect me, I will remove the troops from the South. And that was the end of Black voting rights until basically 1965. And it, oddly enough, happened in something called the Wormley House. It was called the Wormley House Bargain. And that was where the deal was struck. And it was run by a Black woman, oddly enough. And interestingly, when Hayes left office, he was on a scholarship commission. And he gave a scholarship to an up-and-coming Black scholar to go to Germany to study. And that Black scholar was W.B. Du Bois, great sociologist and racial visionary, who signed my baby book April 16th, 1946. And he wrote, "Here's hoping," which was interesting to be of help. He was born in 1868 when the undisputed leader of Black America was Frederick Douglass. He writes Souls of Black Folks in 1903 in opposition to Booker T. Washington, who said in the 1895 Atlanta Cotton States Exposition that all things social would be as separate as the hand, but all things political, we can be united as the fist for our mutual advantage. And then he lives to Du Bois, August 27, 1963, the eve of the March on Washington, when the torch is officially given to Martin Luther King. So, I mean, from somebody whose life spans from Frederick Douglass to Martin Luther King, what a life. There are two Pulitzer Prize-winning volumes on W.B. Du Bois's life, and I would recommend them, highly recommend them. David Levering Lewis, a Fisk graduate, who wrote them. The one statement in that book that stays in my mind, he said that true freedom and equality for African Americans in this country is an ever-receding mirage. Once you think you've gotten there, there's more to go. And I tell my kids, each generation's ceiling is the next generation's floor. I and people my age have to take it as far as we can. And then it's up to you to pick it up and take it as far as you can. So that's kind of at least my philosophy when I talk to them about race. It was only a 5-minute conversation. And I said, the fact that you live where you live, you drink out of a water fountain that you drink out of, you use the library that you used, somebody paid a price for you, and you have to pay a price for somebody else.
Yeah. Well, and I like the word you use, seminal moment when Obama made it to the White House. Because I know, I mean, I'm white, and I had all of those experiences. I've even got a picture of my little hand reaching up into the crowd to get his hand. It's one of my favorite pictures. It just, I mean, so many people were affected by that. Probably just, I don't know, I wasn't alive for all the other history, but certainly so many of us have been impacted by the history that we have shared together with this. And you're right, it needs to be picked up and moved on, because it's not going to stay there.
Yes, history, we can learn from it, but so much of us are ignorant from history. The McCullough book on Truman, there was one statement I'll never forget. He said to a young aide, the only thing new in this world is the history you don't know. And it's all happened before, but if you can learn from it and understand it and appreciate it, I think that's the duty of our teachers these days in school so we can understand civics, and our history teachers. History is not just a bunch of dates. I mean, it's a bunch of stories, and there are people that face the same kind of things that we face today. And how did they come up? How did they approach it? How did they come out of it? What did they do? it would be instructive, very instructive for all of us to understand a little bit better.
Patricia, I said that Noah is an historian, but what I would now say, he is a walking history book.
Yeah.
Because even if you have coffee with Noah, you manage to learn, because he reflects different times and different quotes. I'm taking notes going, oh my God, everything is such an incredible BOMO and slogan for life. But I will bring this back to something a little more local, and please indulge me for our members across the nation and across the pond. We have had a number of Washington high school speakers and a couple of members who went to Washington high school. So that I want to know how that impacted you. But the other one is, for those of you who don't know, one of our most famous entertainers went to Washington high school and ran track, Johnny Mathis. He's a bit older, but did you ever meet Johnny Mathis?
I did. He was coming to San Francisco, and he was at the Jewish Modern Museum in downtown San Francisco. My wife got the last 2 tickets, and she brought a camera, and I got a chance to shake his hand and have a picture. And I just told him I went to school with Mike, his youngest brother, and I can remember at Presidio Middle School, Mike passing out copies of Chances Are on the schoolyard. They lived on 32nd Avenue across from the Safeway. And my mother would catch Mr. Mathis in there sometime. And she said, do you know who that is? That's Johnny Mathis' father. And all he wanted to do was buy a carton of eggs or a quart of milk. And all of a sudden he's deluged by all these folks.
Was that his brother that was a toll taker at the Golden Gate Bridge?
No, that was Clem.
Oh.
Clem Mathis. And then he had another sister, I think her name was Linda, and they came out from Texas, and his father paid for got a piano and paid for singing lessons, and he's had quite the career. He probably the most famous graduate of Washington. We've had a number of graduates, and he would periodically come back, and everybody would be happy. He was a track star there. He was also on the basketball team. He's quite the athlete. And he high jumped against a friend of mine, John Stewart, who was a developer who helped develop the houses in Treasure Island and also in the Presidio. And they were both high jumping against each other. He says, what are you going to do? He says, well, John said he might try out for the Olympics. My friend John Stewart said it. John said, well, I might try out the singing thing. And of course, the rest is legend. Legendary career, legendary voice, probably the most unique one. He and Barbra Streisand have 2 of the most unique voices, I think, in popular music. And Paul Anka had written a book, and he talked about who Sinatra's least favorite singers were. And one was Barbra Streisand, and the other was Johnny Mathis. And I think because their voices are so unique, it's very hard to duplicate what they do. And their songs, once they sing a song, that's it. I mean, Sinatra recorded over 2,000 songs. And you can't say that his voice was unique. His phrasing was unique. His approach to a song was unique. His phrasing is better than anybody's. I mean, he's telling a story when he's singing a song, and that's what you need to do. And you also have to have the experience. My mother said, "Don't sing a song unless you can identify with the experience in the song." It's like a 22-year-old trying to sing My Way. It just doesn't work.
All right. Well, talking about singing, I think that is a perfect transition into, do you have a couple of songs you'd like to sing for us, Noah?
Sure. Chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Jack Frost nipping at your nose. Yuletide carols being sung by a choir. And folks dressed up like Eskimos. Everybody knows a turkey and some mistletoe help to make a season bright. Tiny tots with their eyes all aglow will find it hard to sleep tonight. They know that Santa's on his way. He's loaded lots of toys and goodies on his sleigh. And every mother's child is gonna spy to see if reindeer really know how to fly. And so I'm offering this simple phrase to kids from 1 to 92. Although it's been said many times, many ways, Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas to you.
Yay! You have another or a poem or anything you want.
It was the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. And the stockings were hung by the chimney with care in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. And the children were nestled all snug in their beds while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And minor kerchief and I in my cap had just settled down for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave a luster of midday to objects below. When what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers there came, and he whistled and shouted and called in my name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen, to the top of the roof, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly when they meet with an obstacle mount to the sky. So up to the housetops his coursers there flew, with a sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I joined my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. Bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. He said to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim ere he drove out of sight, Merry Christmas to all in the Golden Gate Breakfast Club, and to all a good night.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. All right. Well, do you have, this is fabulous. We knew you would be the perfect person to close our Zoom year. However, this is probably even more than Susan and I expected. Stories we've never heard. Do you have a closing story or message to us?
Well, it's going to be a new year, and if we can bring about human harmony and understanding of those who we would not particularly agree with, but know that they're human beings, and they want the same things that we want. They might be going about it in a different way. But someone once said to me, I don't know what the future holds, but I do know who holds the future. And as a religious person, I do believe that there is a plan, and I may not live to see it in the way in which I would like to see it, but I think we will all look for the good. I have a friend who's a comedian, and he always looks for the humor in something. And I always look I'm a religious person, I always look for God in the course of my day. What little gifts is he? I call him he still provided for me. And the other quote I will give is from my good friend Patricia Fripp. There's no sense in doing well, that's which should not be done at all. So think of that to you next year.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, unmute yourself and show Noah how much we enjoyed him.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noah.